What Mandela Effect messed you up the most? The one that always gets me is something my friends and I remember from when we were kids. There was a creek that ran under the street in our neighborhood, and we'd often hang out there on the banks of either side of the road. There was this big old rock that we used to sit on all the time. But one day, we walked by it, and it wasn't a rock anymore. It was a small tree, fully rooted, established, like it had always been there. And the rock was completely gone. Now this wasn't a small stone either, it was a huge, heavy boulder. We passed by that spot regularly, and all of us remember the rock being there. But now it isn't. It's just a tree. To this day, my friends and I still call it the Shapeshifting Rock, because it just doesn't make any sense. This one's a bit more personal. Growing up, my mom and I had a tradition. We'd go to the beach every Friday afternoon, and when it got too dark to stay in the water, we'd head to the park right next to the beach. Some Fridays we'd just chill on one of the slides and look up at the stars. One night I saw a light spinning around in the distance, and I asked my mom, what was it? And she told me it was a lighthouse, and that it keeps ships from crashing into the shore at night. I remember that clearly because it sparked this whole obsession I had with sunken ships and shipwrecks. Years later, over a decade later, in the mid to late 2000s, I got back into lighthouses and decided to look up the one that I saw that night, but I couldn't find any trace of it. So I asked my mom, and according to her, that conversation never happened. I kept pushing, and eventually she said, I don't know, babes, I probably forgot. But I looked deeper, and apparently there was never a lighthouse there, ever. Like, at all. To this day, it still messes me up because I know what I saw. I know what we talked about. Okay, hear me out. First of all, in Brazil, you typically don't go to school for the entire day. This is for like middle school and high school. You were in school either in the morning, usually 7:30 a.m. to noon, or the afternoon, usually 1 p.m. to 5:30 p.m. Every single person who was a kid in Brazil and was not in school in the mornings when 9/11 happened remembers watching Dragon Ball Z and having it be interrupted for the breaking news of the attacks. And I mean everyone. Everyone remembers this. It comes up every time someone asks, what were you doing when 9/11 happened? Except Dragon Ball Z wasn't on at that time. Somebody checked the airing times and compared it to the time when the attacks happened. It definitely wasn't on. And yet still, a whole generation of kids back then, now as adults, are 100% sure that they were watching Dragon Ball Z when the news broke out. There are a few Mandela effects that I find pretty interesting, like the whole Berenstain Bears versus Berenstein Bears thing, but the one that really gets me is the Fruit of the Loom logo. I'm absolutely convinced that something changed with that one. Back in elementary school, I had a project where I had to draw the Fruit of the Loom logo. I remember struggling so much to draw the Cornucopia correctly. That memory is crystal clear to me. In fact, I'd argue the only reason I even knew what a cornucopia was as a kid was because of that logo. If we're ever given proof that we're living inside a simulation, I swear I'm going to go back and read the patch notes from the day that they removed the cornucopia. The James Bond movie Moonraker. Jaws, the guy with metal teeth, meets a girl, Dolly, partway through the movie. The girl smiles at him and they immediately hit it off. Why? Because she has braces on her teeth. This apparently didn't happen though. Go watch the movie now. No braces. Even the actress who played her said she didn't have braces. Dolly had braces. This is the hill I will die on. Moonraker was my favorite Bond movie when I was a kid. I know, it's not great, I just like space movies, okay? And I damn near wore that VHS tape out. Literally the entire reason that she and Jaws have chemistry when they meet is because when she first smiles at him, we see that they both have metal in their mouths. He has metal teeth, she has metal on her teeth. Without that fact, this whole thing doesn't make sense. I've followed the Mandela Effect for years. Dolly not having braces and the Fruit of the Loom cornucopia are the two things that literally make me question this reality. I'm not sure if this counts as a Mandela Effect, but I distinctly remember learning about Eli Whitney during Black History Month. We were taught that he invented the cotton gin, and the way it was presented made it seem like he was black. It was framed so positively that we all just assumed he was, and that this was something to celebrate. But it turns out Eli Whitney wasn't black. And even more unsettling, the invention actually supercharged slavery rather than helping to end it. Ed McMahon and the Publishers Clearinghouse sweepstakes. Everyone remembers him being a part of it, showing up with a giant check and balloons. There was even a joke about it in The Golden Girls. But apparently, he was never involved? No Ed McMahon, no big check, and yet so many of us remember it like it really happened. Honestly, it's not even the famous Mandela effects that get to me. It's the little things in my own town that change. Small stuff, but it drives me crazy. There's this spot near one of the shops where my brother and I would go on walks. Near it were these weird little pillars, the kind you would use to stop cars from driving through. Some days they're just gone, and when I ask people about it, no one remembers them ever being there. Then on other days, the pillars are there, and if I mention it, people say they've always been there. It's one of the few Mandela effects I've experienced firsthand in my town, and it seriously messes with me. I have a memory from 30 to 40 years ago of noticing that the Cornucopia was missing from the Fruit of the Loom label. I was looking at the tag on my t-shirt and distinctly remember thinking to myself, they removed the Cornucopia. In other words, I don't exactly remember seeing the Cornucopia itself, but I clearly remember recognizing that it was gone. And that memory feels genuine. What really gets me is that this happened long before I'd ever heard of the Mandela Effect. It wasn't something influenced by outside information, it was just something I quietly noticed and accepted back then. Until maybe a year ago, if you had asked me, I would have confidently said that the Fruit of the Loom logo did have a cornucopia and that they changed it sometime in the 1980s. I would have been dead sure of that. When I first saw the Mandela Effect discussion around this logo, I immediately started digging through my oldest shirts to see if I still had a label with the cornucopia. I didn't find any, of course, but I know what I remembered. I have a personal Mandela Effect that still messes with my head a full decade later. I used to drive a 2001 Dodge Neon. I had it for years, put over 80,000 miles on it. I commuted to college in it, then drove it in the opposite direction to work. I eventually lived out of that car a few times, and I remember one detail vividly. It had black seats. Black interior, black seats, no question. I took breaks in those seats, napped in them, spilled food on them. You don't forget details like that. But the day I went to trade it in, I was at the dealership pulling my stuff out, and the seats were green. Bright, unmistakably green. In my black Dodge Neon, the same one I had spent years in. I was stunned, like actually speechless. I turned to my girlfriend, now wife, and she just casually says, "Oh, they've always been green." No, they haven't. This still haunts me. I know what I saw. I know what I lived with. To this day, I can't explain it. It makes me feel like nothing is real, like life glitched and nobody else noticed but me. The Tinkerbell one from the Disney logo seriously gets me, and here's why. The first time I heard about it, I already imagined it. I was watching some top 10 Mandela Effects video, and the narrator said, "Next up, the Disney logo." My brain instantly pictured Tinkerbell flying across the screen and drawing an arc over the Disney castle with her wand. Then this guy goes, "That's the Mandela Effect. Tinkerbell never did that." And I just froze, because I already saw it in my mind before he even explained what the Mandela Effect was. I swear on everything, I remember that vision. I've seen it. It was real. And I don't care what anyone says, I know I'm not crazy. I can't get over the death mask of King Tutankhamun. I was obsessed with Egyptology as a kid. In 5th grade, I even drew myself as the queen of the Upper and Lower Nile, with my pet cheetah by my side. I still have a bunch of my childhood books on ancient Egypt. And back then, King Tut's headdress had a cobra on it. Just the cobra. That's what I remember seeing in these books, documentaries, everything. So imagine my shock when I saw the mask again recently, and there was suddenly a vulture next to the cobra? Where did the freaking vulture come from? I remember one of my earliest Mandela Effect type moments I ever experienced, way before it was even called that. It was this sitcom memory from the 70s, 80s, or maybe early 90s. In the intro credits, when the theme song plays and each actor's name appears, there's this one specific clip I've never forgotten. One of the characters is using a paint roller, and they accidentally paint roll right across another character's face. The second person turns around, shocked, and just as they react, the actor with the roller looks directly at the camera, and the screen freezes with their name on it. So many people, hundreds, remembered this exact moment and discussed it on some old internet forum, but no one could ever find it. It's like it never existed, but we all swear it did. I grew up with these sweet old neighbors down the street. They were like family to us, always helping out during tough times when I was a kid. Both of them even came to my wedding. She passed away about 10 years ago, and I remember him dying 3 years ago. But last night, my mom and I were talking, and she casually mentioned how her daughter still visits him. And I was like, wait, what? Charlie died. You and Dad went to his funeral back in 2018. I swear I remember grieving his death. I remember being sad. I remember the funeral. And now, apparently, he's still alive? And no one believes me. Zero from The Nightmare Before Christmas, having an orange pumpkin nose, absolutely messes with me. I specifically remember it being red, just like Rudolph. I even remember toys showing him with a red nose. It was never a question in my mind. But apparently, it's always been an orange pumpkin. One theory I've heard is that with HD and 4K remasters, we can now actually see the pumpkin detail, whereas on old VHS or DVD versions, the quality wasn't good enough to notice it clearly. I don't know, maybe that's true, but it still doesn't explain why I so clearly remember it being red. It feels like something changed. I just had one happen to me personally. I went to this mall where I swore there was a gym. I asked a few employees if they knew where it was, and none of them had any idea what I was talking about. I walked around the whole place and couldn't find it anywhere. A few months later, I go back and it's right there. Plain as day, like huge signage, completely impossible to miss. There's no way I overlooked it before. You'd have to be strung out or completely out of it to miss something that obvious. I have no clue how or when it happened, but it seriously freaked me out. I truly believe that the Lindbergh baby was never found. As a historian, I would bet everything I have on it. Yet suddenly, they claim the body was discovered. No way, that baby was never found. There's even a Simpsons scene where Grandpa Simpson pretends to be the lost Lindbergh baby. Why would that scene exist if the baby's body had been found? I was responsible for Mandela affecting my whole family. There was a football player on a rival team who always did the same stupid celebration whenever he made a good play. We all hated it. One day, while we were all complaining about it, I jokingly said something like, he probably does that celebration as a last request for a poor sick kid or something, and we're the jerks. Well, years later, the celebration came up again, and my brother said, yeah, but I get it since he's doing it for that sick kid. And I was instantly like, wait, what? There is no sick kid. But every single member of my family refuted me. They all remembered reading articles or seeing news segments explaining why he did the celebration. For years, they didn't hate on it because of that story. Some of them even remembered specific details, like what disease the kid had or what year it happened. It blew all their minds when I made them look it up, and no such story existed. When I got a job in a different city, on my very first day, new job, new city, I had no idea what to do for lunch, but I knew I wanted to explore and see what the city had to offer. While driving around, I saw a big boy statue. You know, the cartoony boy holding a big burger over his head? Anyway, I saw this big boy statue and I knew instantly, this is the place. This is where I'm eating. It was a tiny burger shack called Sonny's, and it looked like it hadn't been touched since the 70s, and it was amazing. I ate there a few times during my first few months living in that city. I always knew exactly where it was because you could spot that 10-meter tall statue from multiple directions. Eventually, our office moved to a different part of town, and I stopped going. Months ago, I heard that place was being sold. I asked someone, what's going to happen to the Burger Boy statue? They replied, what statue? It turns out there is no statue there. Some people vaguely remember one, maybe across the street, maybe in front of another building, but most locals say they've lived there for years and swear there was never a statue. I even checked Google Street View, going back through historical images, and as far as I can tell, it never existed. So why is my memory of this giant boy holding a burger over his head, leading me to deliciousness, so strong? Steele, not Danielle Steele. I worked at a public library, and I was making a label for a new book she had published, and I remember thinking, did they print her name wrong? It should have an E at the end. I went over to the shelf to double check, and every single book was spelled without the E. Now I use that as a kind of test, to see if someone's from the same timeline as me. I had a best friend back in kindergarten. He had an older brother the same age as my older brother, and those two used to get into fights all the time. Their family lived just a few houses down from ours. Then, halfway through the school year, for unknown reasons, they suddenly moved away. We never saw or heard from them again. Also worth noting, I had a very specific nickname at that time in my life. About 14 years later, I was at a friend's apartment one night hanging out with a few people. Some of their friends came over, and this one guy walked in who looked really familiar. I thought, could that be him? But I didn't say anything. Then I found out he had the same name. Still, I said nothing. No one in that room knew my childhood nickname. After a while, he points at me and asks, is your name nickname? It had to be him. I said yes, and asked if he used to go to our old school. He said no. I asked if he had an older brother. He said no. We ended up having this long, strange conversation, trying to sort out what we remembered about each other. He clearly remembered me, but I had a bunch of memories about him that were apparently wrong. And yet, he was the same kid. The next day, I asked my entire family what they remembered about his family, and all the details matched. His name, his brother, the school, the town, everything. Years later, my husband introduced me to the Fruit of the Loom Mandela Effect. I definitely remember the Cornucopia. After learning about the Mandela Effect, I told him about this friend, and he said, "That's probably your Mandela Effect experience." This one is not technically a Mandela Effect, since no one outside of my family and friends would know about it, but the spelling of my daughter's name changed when she was 8 years old. Every legal document, her birth certificate, medical records, school records, even previously filed tax returns, all changed by one letter. That's what convinced me that this is something real. Bruce Springsteen's born in the USA, where he has a red hat in his back pocket? No. This is the same guy who was known for wearing red bandanas all the time during that era. If I woke up tomorrow and saw Indiana Jones wearing a straw hat with a feather in it, I wouldn't be any more surprised than the day I saw that album cover. It will always be the movie Shazaam with Sinbad. I remember looking this up before anyone was even talking about it online, and all that came up was Kazam, the one with Shaq. I got so mad at the search engine, thinking it was just being stupid and showing me a copycat movie I never watched or cared about. It seriously bothers me that Shazaam supposedly never existed, because I saw it. I remember it clearly. I even remember having a conversation with my siblings about whether the title of the movie was Shazaam or Sinbad, because Sinbad's name was printed in bigger letters on the VHS box. Years later, I looked it up again and found all the Mandela Effect stuff claiming it never existed. So I texted each of my siblings, "What was that Genie movie we saw as kids, and who was in it?" All but one immediately replied, "Shazaam, Sinbad." Before I told them anything else, I asked them a few more questions, and they remembered specific details about it too. When I showed them it supposedly never existed, their minds were blown. I don't know how widespread this one is, but it hit me hard. Hitler's eyes. I have vivid memories of my favorite teacher making fun of Hitler for wanting to create an Aryan race, even though he himself wasn't Aryan, because he had brown eyes. I remember reading that in our textbooks too. It was clearly stated. Years after I finished school, I was watching a movie where Hitler had blue eyes, and I thought that was odd. I brought it up with my girlfriend at the time, and she was confused. She said, "Hitler had blue eyes." Sure enough, I looked it up, and apparently, Adolf Hitler had deep blue eyes. To this day, I'm still confused. I'm a history buff. That teacher was my favorite. His classes are the ones I remember the most clearly, and yet it seems I remembered this completely wrong. Millions of people all have the same mistaken memories, like the Fruit of the Loom logo having a cornucopia in it. First of all, why would everyone remember a cornucopia specifically? Why not a basket, a bushel, a dish, a bag, or any other kind of container? Why do millions of people agree on a cornucopia? This whole thing doesn't make sense. It's like something is happening in our reality that we don't fully understand. And no, in my opinion, millions of people don't misremember the exact same thing over and over. So that wraps up this video. What'd you think? I'm curious to hear what Mandela Effect messes you up the most. Mine has always been the Black Tom explosion. It's just too weird. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed this new style of video. I usually spend weeks meticulously editing these videos, so I wanted to see if there was an easier way to get videos out faster. So let me hear your thoughts below. Thanks for watching, and remember, if you haven't already, be sure to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and check out my Patreon. It helps me keep the lights on. Until next time, never stop searching.